The moment you win the lottery, two clocks are activated. One measures the explosive growth of your new money. The other begins a quiet, relentless countdown on your life. For the 6 people in this report, that second clock reached 0 first. This is not entertainment. Their stories are not a guide to be followed. They are a map of dead ends, a brutal, documented warning that the ultimate prize often comes with the ultimate price. For 46 years, Daniele Riccardi's world was slow. It was measured by the speed of a rusty tractor crawling across a field in Parma, Italy, a region famous for its food but unforgiving to the men who worked its soil. His reality was the permanent ache in his lower back, the smell of diesel fuel that clung to his clothes, and the constant quiet anxiety about money. Life wasn't bad. It was just a loop. Every sunrise brought the same chores, the same challenges, the same exhaustion. He was a man defined by his labor. Then, a cheap lottery ticket bought on a whim at a local tobacco shop tore a hole in that loop. He won 1 million euros. At first, the number was just a fantasy, an impossible string of zeros. It only became real on Friday afternoon, when he stood before a bank teller and watched 200,000 euros materialize in his account. The world suddenly felt different, lighter. He walked out of the bank, and for the first time the sun on his face felt like a luxury, not a clock telling him to get back to work. His first decision as a rich man was primal and immediate. He walked directly to a motorcycle dealership, a place he had only ever glanced at before. He pointed at the most aggressive machine on the floor, a brand new Ducati monster. It was blood red, a symphony of polished steel and raw power, and it looked like it was breaking the speed limit while standing still. It was the physical opposite of his entire life. When the salesman began his pitch, Daniele simply cut him off. He paid in cash, the stack of bills feeling like paper from a board game. It wasn't earned money, it was miracle money, and it felt like it had no rules. That night he celebrated, the roar of the new engine, a promise of a future without fences. The next morning, Saturday, he woke up to a perfect sun-drenched day. This was day 1. He threw a leg over the Ducati. The cold leather a stark contrast to the familiar cracked vinyl of his tractor seat. The engine exploded with a raw power that vibrated through his entire body, a new kind of heartbeat. He was no longer a farmer. He was free. He took off down the country roads he knew by heart, roads he could navigate in his sleep. But he had only ever known them at a crawl. Today, he was flying. The speedometer climbed past 140 kilometers per hour, turning the familiar landscape into a green and yellow blur. He approached a gentle curve he'd taken thousands of times. But overconfidence, fueled by sudden wealth, is a powerful and dangerous drug. He saw the patch of loose gravel on the asphalt a moment too late. It was a minor imperfection, something his tractor would have crushed without notice. At this speed, it was a landmine. The Ducati's rear tire skidded for just a fraction of a second, but that was all it took. The laws of physics do not care about lottery tickets. The motorcycle shot out from under him, a 200-kilogram missile of metal. Daniele's body became a separate object, an unwilling passenger on a terminal flight, hurtling through the air toward an old stone wall that had lined the field for generations. There was no time to react, no time to scream. The impact was absolute. His body was subjected to a sudden and violent deceleration, resulting in immediate and fatal polytraumatic injuries. His million-euro future was erased in a single, brutal instant. The first police officers on the scene found an eerie quiet, the silence broken only by the chirping of birds. The red Ducati lay wrecked in the field, its engine ticking as the hot metal cooled. On the dashboard, a small digital clock was still powered on, silently counting the seconds of a life that had already ended. Lying on the grass a few feet away was his old, worn leather wallet, a relic from a life he thought he had escaped just one day before. Daniele Riccardi was a millionaire for less than 24 hours. The symbol of his new freedom had become the instrument of his instant death. In 2006, a lottery ticket worth $30 million fell into the hands of the one man in Lakeland, Florida, least equipped to handle it: Abraham Shakespeare. He was a 42-year-old truck driver's assistant with a long criminal record for petty crimes, a genuinely good heart, and an 8th-grade education that left him functionally illiterate. When he chose the lump sum payment, a staggering $17 million was wired into the account of a man who had never seen more than a few $1,000s in his life. His immediate instinct was not self-indulgence, but a radical, almost reckless generosity. He bought his mother a home, paid off the mortgages of friends, and gave wads of cash to anyone with a convincing sob story. This kindness, however, acted like blood in the water. His life became a non-stop parade of old acquaintances, distant relatives, and complete strangers, all claiming a piece of his fortune. He was a man being hunted, not for sport, but for his bank account. Overwhelmed and exhausted, Abraham famously told his one remaining trusted friend, "I'd have been better off broke." He was right. That's when Doris "Dee Moore entered his life. She didn't approach him like the others with her hand out. She approached him as a businesswoman, a savior. She promised to write a book about his story and, more importantly, to become a shield, protecting his assets from the endless sea of predators. For Abraham, it was the ultimate safety betrayal. He believed he had finally found an ally. He trusted her completely. She quickly formed a corporation, Abraham Shakespeare LLC, and had him sign a stack of legal documents he couldn't possibly read. With a few strokes of a pen, he unknowingly signed away control of every last dollar he owned, becoming a mere employee of his own fortune, with Dee as the CEO. The hunt was over. The prey was now caged. While Abraham was given a small allowance to live on, Dee began a furious spending spree. She bought a Hummer, a Corvette, a luxury vacation home, and paid for plastic surgery, all with his money. She transferred his $1 million mansion into her company's name for just $655,000. Abraham, though uneducated, wasn't stupid. He saw his world shrinking while hers exploded. He confronted her, demanding to know where his millions were going. But Dee was a master manipulator. She gaslighted him, showing him forged bank statements and convincing him his old friends were the real thieves. By early 2009, the money was almost gone. Abraham was no longer a golden goose. He was a liability, a loose end who could talk to the police. On April 6, 2009, she lured him to a property in Plant City. There was no final dramatic confrontation. There was only a cold, calculated business decision. Armed with a .38 Smith & Wesson revolver, she discharged the weapon. 2 projectiles struck Abraham's torso, resulting in catastrophic internal damage and the immediate, fatal cessation of all vital functions. His financial troubles were over. Her legal troubles were just beginning. She had her ex-boyfriend dig a 5-foot hole in her backyard with a backhoe, then buried Abraham's body herself. To ensure he was never found, she had a thick concrete slab poured over the grave, disguised as a parking spot or patio. For 7 agonizing months, she impersonated him, using his phone to send his family texts saying he was tired of the pressure and had fled to the Caribbean. But the lies began to fray. In January 2010, an informant led authorities to her property. Investigators tapped the concrete slab, and the hollow sound confirmed their suspicions. An excavator cracked the concrete, and underneath, they found the remains of the kind illiterate man who just wanted to share his luck. Dee Moore was arrested, tried, and sentenced to life in prison. The final artifact of Abraham's $30 million jackpot wasn't a car or a house. It was a cold slab of concrete, a permanent tombstone for a fortune that cost him everything. For 22 years, Leo Vance was human background noise. His world was a cramped apartment that smelled of stale takeout, a dead-end job stocking shelves under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, and the constant quiet humiliation of being invisible. Life was a series of closed doors and averted eyes, a reality where he was always on the outside of the party, looking in. He wasn't poor enough to be a tragedy, just broke enough to be ignored. Then, a single $1 lottery ticket purchased with the last of his pocket change detonated that gray reality. He had won $4.8 million. The money was not a tool for a comfortable future. For Leo, it was a weapon. It was never about the luxury cars or the designer clothes. It was about revenge. A quiet social revenge against every person who had ever looked through him. His first and only plan was to stage a coronation, a party so legendary it would burn his name into the city's memory. He rented the most expensive penthouse in town, a glass fortress in the sky with a sprawling balcony that overlooked the city lights like a kingdom. The night of the party was the grand opening of his new life. He invited everyone, the classmates who bullied him, the bosses who fired him, the women who laughed at him, and they all came. They came for the free champagne, for the spectacle, and for a piece of the man they now saw as a king. For the first time, Leo was the center of the universe. The air was thick with loud music and the scent of expensive perfume. The thumping bass vibrated through the floor, a new heartbeat for his new life. Surrounded by a crowd of smiling strangers, their faces illuminated by the flash of phone cameras, Leo felt a surge of pure, intoxicating power. It was a potent cocktail, mixed with glass after glass of champagne. He was no longer the invisible stock boy. He was the master of ceremonies, the man everyone wanted to know. But the quiet approval wasn't enough. He needed a defining moment, a final, undeniable act of dominance. He saw the balcony railing, a low glass wall separating his triumph from the dizzying drop to the street below. In his mind, clouded by alcohol and a lifetime of insecurity, it wasn't a danger. It was a stage. This was his safety betrayal, the moment he confused wealth with invincibility. Shouting for everyone's attention, he climbed onto the slick, narrow railing, a champagne bottle held high like a scepter. For a breathtaking second, it worked. The crowd gasped. Phones were raised, and every single eye was on him. His wish was granted. He was the absolute center of attention. He opened his mouth to deliver a toast to his new kingdom, but the words never came out. His center of gravity shifted a fatal inch. His expensive, slick-soled shoes found no purchase on the smooth surface. There was a moment of confused, clumsy scrambling, his fingers finding nothing but empty air. Then, he simply tipped backward into the void. Time dilated. The roar of the party was replaced by the rush of wind. The city lights, once a beautiful tapestry at his feet, became a terrifying, rapidly approaching grid. It was an uncontrolled descent, a final horrifying flight powered by gravity, a force that does not care about lottery tickets. His body was subjected to a sudden, catastrophic deceleration upon impact, resulting in immediate and fatal polytraumatic injuries. Back in the penthouse, the music cut out. A champagne glass shattered on the balcony floor. 100 phones, which had been recording his moment of glory, now captured only the horrified, silent faces of his guests. The police who arrived found a scene of chaos and abandoned luxury. Leo Vance got his wish. He had hosted the most talked-about party of the year. He was finally, undeniably famous. But his fame lasted only as long as the headline in the next morning's news, a tragic artifact of a man who gained the whole world for a single night, only to lose it all in a single stupid second. In the cold, wind-swept city of Winnipeg in 1998, Gerald Moswagon's life was a flat, unchanging landscape of hard manual labor. His reality was defined by the deep, biting cold that seeped through his work clothes, the constant ache in his muscles, and the profound sense of invisibility that comes from a life spent performing thankless tasks. He was just another guy trying to get by, his dreams small and practical, limited to a working truck and enough money to survive the next brutal winter. Then, on a freezing Tuesday, a single Super 7 lottery ticket, bought with spare change at a local convenience store, ignited a fuse that would lead to a spectacular explosion, obliterating his old life. He had won the $10 million jackpot. In that single, disbelieving moment, Gerald Muswagon was no longer an invisible man. He was a local god, the center of a universe that had never even known he existed. The money, however, was never a tool for building a future. For him, it was pure rocket fuel for a desperate, frantic present, a way to burn away the memory of his former self. His first act was a symphony of reckless generosity. He bought a fleet of brand new cars and trucks, not just for himself, but for friends, family, and even casual acquaintances, transforming his quiet residential street into a personal victory parade of gleaming chrome and roaring engines. He then purchased a large house and immediately converted it into a non-stop party zone. This wasn't a home. It was a stage for his new identity. The doors were never locked, the music was always blasting, and alcohol flowed freely for the hundreds of new friends who materialized from nowhere, all eager to orbit the man with the money. Gerald thrived on their attention, buying friendship by the case and mistaking the blinding reflection of his wealth for genuine respect. He desperately needed to feel important, and for a while, the money bought him that feeling. He started a logging business, not out of any passion for the industry, but to project the image of a serious entrepreneur. It was another prop on his stage, a company run with the same chaotic energy as his parties, staffed by friends who knew more about drinking than logging. It quickly became a financial black hole, hemorrhaging cash on flashy, oversized equipment that was often broken or misused. For 7 years, he lived at the center of this manufactured universe, a king whose throne was built on stacks of rapidly dwindling cash, his life a blur of bad investments and hollow celebrations. But every fire burns out. By 2005, the $10 million was gone. The moment of reckoning came not as a gradual decline, but as a sudden, brutal shock. A credit card was declined. A check bounced. A final horrifying look at his bank statement revealed the truth. It was all over. Every dollar had been spent, squandered, or given away. The fleet of cars was repossessed one by one. The legendary party house, its walls stained with the ghosts of 1,000 parties, fell silent and was sold to cover a mountain of debt. And the moment the money vanished, so did the crowd. The phone that once rang constantly with invitations now never made a sound. The silence that rushed in to fill the void was a crushing, physical presence. Gerald was left utterly alone, a king without a kingdom, stranded in the ruins of the life he had so carelessly constructed. He was forced to return to the very thing he thought he had escaped forever: hard, low-wage manual labor on a friend's farm. The shame was a daily torment. He wasn't just a laborer anymore. He was a spectacle of failure, a local legend for all the wrong reasons. Every glance from a stranger felt like a judgment. The fall from that fragile, self-made pedestal was too great a distance. The identity he had bought for himself had been repossessed, and he couldn't stand to be the invisible man again, especially now that he knew what it felt like to be seen. In the end, he returned to his parents' home, the one place he had left. It was there, in the deep quiet of their garage, surrounded by the mundane tools of a life he once fled, that his tragic story concluded. He was found lifeless, the official cause of death confirming the final, devastating toll of his psychological collapse. His karma was not a lightning strike from the heavens. It was the slow, predictable gravity of his own choices. A devastating final lesson that when you buy your friends, your own life is the final price. The summer of 2012 baked the streets of Chicago, a city where dreams were either forged in fire or melted away under the relentless pressure of daily life. For 46-year-old Uruj Khan, an immigrant from India, life was a predictable and honest rhythm. He was the owner of a small dry cleaning business, a world defined by the clean, sharp scent of chemical solvents and the constant comforting hiss of industrial steam presses. He was a man who believed in the tangible results of hard work, not the flimsy promise of luck. Yet, on a whim, during a stop at a local 7-Eleven, he bought a scratch-off lottery ticket. It was an impulsive $2 purchase, a minor deviation from a life of routine. That small act of chance, however, detonated his entire reality. He scratched the ticket to reveal a $1 million prize. On June 26th, he stood before the flashing cameras of the Illinois lottery, a giant, novelty-sized check in his hands, his smile broadcasting a profound sense of relief that comes only after decades of struggle. He announced his humble plans to the world: pay off his mortgages, invest in the business that had sustained him, and make a donation to a children's hospital. He chose a lump sum payment, which, after taxes, would net him approximately $425,000. The check was printed and celebrated, but the money had not yet been transferred to his bank account. It existed only as a concrete promise, a future he could almost touch. On the evening of July 19th, he gathered his family for a special meal to celebrate their new life. At the dinner table were his wife, his teenage daughter, and his father-in-law, his entire inner circle. The meal itself was unremarkable, a traditional curry he had eaten countless times. There was no suspicious taste, no hesitation, no hint of the betrayal that was silently unfolding. He went to bed that night, feeling a sense of peace he had never known, believing his family's future was finally secure. The very next morning, that security shattered. Khan woke up, took only a few steps from his bed, and suddenly let out a single piercing scream of agony before collapsing violently to the floor. By the time paramedics arrived, his body was lifeless. Initially, the official story was one of tragic irony. The Cook County medical examiner conducted a routine external examination and concluded that Khan had died of natural causes. The report listed arteriosclerotic cardiovascular disease, essentially a heart attack brought on by hardened arteries. A terrible coincidence, the universe playing a cruel joke. The case was officially closed. But one of Khan's closest relatives, his brother back in India, was tormented by the timing. He refused to accept it. Healthy men do not win the lottery and simply die the next day. He relentlessly pushed the authorities from afar, pleading with them to investigate further. His persistence finally broke through the bureaucratic inertia. A judge was convinced to order an exhumation and a comprehensive toxicology screen on Khan's preserved blood samples. The lab results that came back turned the case upside down. They revealed no evidence of a heart attack. Instead, they showed a massive, unequivocally lethal dose of cyanide in his system. Cyanide is a poison of horrifying efficiency. It prevents the body's cells from using oxygen, triggering a rapid cascading organ failure that mimics a cardiac event. It is internal suffocation. The case was instantly reclassified from a natural death to a homicide. The police now faced a perfect murder mystery. With no signs of forced entry, the poison had to have been administered by someone inside the house, almost certainly mixed into his final meal. The killer was not a stranger. It was someone who had sat at the dinner table with him, sharing in his joy while knowing it would be his last. The investigation immediately zeroed in on his family, but it slammed into a wall of silence and denial. No one confessed. No one broke. With no direct evidence, no murder weapon, and no witnesses, the case grew impossibly cold. The state attorney's office eventually had to admit defeat, stating there was simply not enough evidence to charge anyone. The murder of Uruj Khan remains officially unsolved, a ghost in the city's crime files. The $1 million prize, his ticket to freedom, became the motive for his meticulously planned execution. The actual check for $425,000 was eventually cashed, its value becoming the subject of a bitter legal war between the very people who were last to see him alive. His story serves as the ultimate warning. Winning the lottery didn't give him a new life. It just painted a target on his back and revealed that the greatest danger often hides behind the most familiar smile. A lottery pool is a sacred pact, a shared hope forged in the Georgia sun, amidst the grit and noise of a construction site where trust is the only currency that truly matters. For a crew of laborers in Warner Robins, it was a weekly ritual that broke the monotony of back-breaking work. Their boss, Eric Cervantes, would collect cash, and one trusted man would buy the tickets. In November 2010, that man was Jose Antonio Quitoc, an undocumented immigrant from Guatemala. He was a quiet, hard worker, a man living in the shadows for whom the American dream was a distant, almost mythical concept. When he scanned the numbers on a Fantasy 5 ticket they had collectively purchased, his world stopped. They had won. The jackpot was $750,000. In that one, silent, earth-shattering moment, a lifetime of poverty and desperation was pitted against a bond of brotherhood. The brotherhood lost. A simple, corrosive thought took root in his mind and grew into an unbreakable conviction. This belongs to me. He walked back to the crew, his face a mask of disappointment he didn't know he could wear. He looked his friends in the eye, the men with whom he shared his lunches and his struggles, and delivered the lie that would sign his death warrant. Nothing this week. Maybe next time. The first part of his plan was a success. The second was an immediate failure. When he went to claim his prize, lottery officials informed him of a critical roadblock. As an undocumented immigrant, he could not legally cash the ticket. His desperate solution was to ask a friend to claim it for him in exchange for a substantial cut. But the seeds of suspicion had already been planted. Eric Cervantes, his boss, heard the news of a large winning ticket sold at the exact store on the exact day. He confronted Quitoc, whose denials now sounded hollow. The dream of a secret fortune dissolved into the nightmare of a public war. Cervantes hired a lawyer, and a lawsuit was filed. A judge immediately issued an injunction, freezing the entire $750,000. The money was now a ghost, a fortune he could see on a bank statement but could never touch. The prize had become his prison. The legal battle that followed was a slow, grinding torture. To defend his lot in court, he had to burn through his life savings to pay lawyers, watching his own money disappear in a futile attempt to claim money that wasn't his. He descended into a state of relentless paranoia. Every knock on the door, every ringing phone was a potential threat. The stress was a physical poison, stealing his sleep and eroding his health. To escape the crushing pressure of his own deceit, he turned to cocaine. It wasn't for parties. It was a desperate form of self-medication, a way to numb the gnawing anxiety and the terror of being exposed. His life devolved into a chaotic spiral of court appearances, mounting legal bills, and a deepening dependence on the drug. Finally, the day of judgment came. In court, the judge listened to the testimonies and delivered a verdict that was as swift as it was brutal. He declared Quitoc's story a complete fabrication and ruled that the verbal agreement of the lottery pool was an unbreakable contract. The entire $750,000 was awarded to Eric Cervantes and the rest of the crew. Quitoc was left with absolutely nothing but the crippling debt from his legal fees. He had lost the money, his job, the respect of his community, and his own soul. Just a few weeks after the verdict, police were called to his home after he failed to show up for work. They found his body. There was no evidence of foul play, no sign of a struggle. The coroner's report was clinical and direct. The cause of death was an overdose. The immense stress of the lawsuit, combined with the finality of his defeat, had pushed him over a fatal edge. He wasn't murdered for his winnings. He was the sole architect of his own destruction, a man killed not by a bullet, but by his own greed. The lie he told to steal a fortune became the very mechanism that claimed his life, a perfect, inescapable loop of karmic justice. The stories are over. The warning is clear. A lottery jackpot is a weapon, and it will find the weakest hand. So, a final question before the screen goes black. When the money hits your account, who becomes your first enemy? The jealous friend, the greedy relative, or the arrogant stranger who starts answering to your name? Describe your first enemy in the comments. Our work is funded by your attention. Prove you were paying attention with a like. Subscribe for the next case file.